Hi, my name is Ephraim Baer. I've been teaching people how to learn Gemara independently for over 20 years, and this is a sample video, very brief, just to give you a taste of what a Gemara skills class is like. Now, we're going to use the first Mishnah in Maseches Makos and the first line of the Gemara for this. Before we do that, though, I just want to mention that an important point when you're learning Gemara is to look at the Gemara as if it's your chavrusa. What I mean by that is the Gemara is made up of steps. There's 6 types of steps. There's statements, information questions, challenge questions, answers, proofs, and explanations. So each step of the Gemara needs a response from you, the learner. So before you go on to the second step of the Gemara, or the third step, or the fourth step, you need to learn how to respond to the Gemara. If you learn how to respond to the Gemara, it'll make the learning much more alive, and you'll see how you're anticipating what the Gemara is going to do with your interaction. Okay, that's point number 1. Second point is that whenever you communicate, you need to have a point. You're obviously trying to convey something when you communicate. Usually, or almost always, if not always, there's going to be a basis for your point. I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to tell somebody that they should be careful when they're drinking the soup because you don't want them to get burnt. So you might say, the soup is hot. Now that's not your point. Your point is, don't drink the soup right now. Now, what's the basis for the point? Because the soup is hot. So a clear communication would be, since the soup is hot, therefore, don't drink it yet, or take it slowly. Since introduces the basis, therefore, introduces the point. Very often people do not say both of those, and that's what leads to unclear communication. Now, if you hear something, how do you know if you're hearing the basis or you're hearing the point? So there's a test you could do. If when you hear something, you ask yourself, so what? Then you know that you heard the basis, but you didn't hear the point. For example, if someone says to you, the soup is hot, so in your mind you might be thinking, so what? Like, why are you telling me this? Now, you would already know now, because you've experienced that before, that the person is trying to tell you, don't drink the soup. But let's say someone tells you, I have a Band-Aid on my elbow. Then you probably would think, like, why are you telling me this? So what? Okay? Now, I don't know why the person told you that, but the person certainly had a reason to tell you that, and whatever the reason was, that's their point that they're really trying to get across. The basis for the point is because I have a Band-Aid on my elbow. So again, if you have to ask yourself, like, so what? Like, why are you telling me this? That means they told you the basis, and you have to figure out the point. On the other hand, if you ask yourself, why or who says, then they told you the point, and you just don't know the basis. For example, if someone tells their child, wear a sweater when you go outside. So the parent said the point, wear a sweater. But the child might be thinking, why do I have to wear a sweater? Which means the parent didn't say the basis. The basis was, it's very cold outside and I don't want you to catch a cold. Since it's very cold outside and I don't want you to catch a cold, therefore, wear a sweater to go outside. So when learning Gemara, it's important to make sure that at each step you understand what the basis is and what the point is. If the Gemara says both of them, great. But more than likely, the Gemara will not do that. Okay, now we're going to go to the first Mishnah in Makos, and I just want to show you one step of the Gemara and how we would analyze it in this Gemara skills class. In order to do that, I need to tell you what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah starts like this. Ketzad ha'edim na'asim zomimim. How do the witnesses become zomimim? For those of you who don't know, edim zomimim are witnesses who are liars, and the only way they become zomimim is if a second group of witnesses testify that the first group were not at the location that they claimed to have been at, and they could not have seen what they claimed to have seen. For example, group 1 says, we were at Palisades Mall and we saw a murder at Modell's at 10 a.m. on April 1st. Group 2 says, that's impossible. There might have been a murder there, but it's impossible that you saw it because at 10 a.m. on April 1st, you were with us in Poughkeepsie at a gas station. So the second testimony took the first witnesses away from the location where they could have seen the testimony. That makes them zomimim. And the Torah says, when you become Edom zomimim, whatever would have happened to the defendant through your testimony, in this case, the defendant would have been killed for murder, that's what happens to the Edom zomimim. So here the Mishnah says, how do witnesses become zomimim? It sounds like the Mishnah is asking, what's the process? And the answer would be, as I just told you, a second group come and say you were with us somewhere else. However, the Mishnah does not say anything about that. All the Mishnah does is gives two examples of cases where witnesses testify something and then they do not get the reciprocal punishment. They don't get what they're trying to give. Instead, they get lashes. I'm not going to go through that because I want to make this as brief as possible. So again, the Mishnah asks, how do witnesses become zomimim? The answer is two examples where witnesses don't get the reciprocal punishment, they get lashes. So let's just see the first step of the Gemara. The Gemara says, behold, Ketzad ein ha'edim na'asim zomimim. How do the witnesses not become zomimim? Mi ba'ilei is what it should have said. That was a literal translation. I'll say it again. Behold, how do the witnesses not become zomimim is what it should have said. Now, when you hear that, you have to process it. So the first thing that I would do when I hear that is I would say, what does the Gemara mean that it should have said, how do witnesses not become zomimim? What does that even mean, how do witnesses not become zomimim? The way witnesses don't become zomimim is by not lying. That's the only thing they could do to prevent themselves from becoming zomimim. Or if a second group doesn't come and testify, they don't become zomimim. But you don't ask how you don't become zomimim. You could ask how you do become zomimim. So what does the Gemara mean that it should have said, how do witnesses not become zomimim? So that line must mean something different. Okay, that's just point number one. Now, in order to understand this step, we need to ask ourselves 4 questions. Question number 1. If the Gemara is telling us that the Mishnah should have said, how do Edom not become zomimim? It must be that it's saying it should have said that instead of something that it actually said. Instead of saying X in the Mishnah, it should have said, how do Edom not become zomimim? So the first question is, what is the Gemara's suggestion replacing? So that's easy. It's replacing the Mishnah's words, Ketzad ha'edim na'asim zomimim. Second question. If the Gemara wants to replace those words, it must be there's some problem with those words. So what is the problem with the words, how do Edom become zomimim? Why do we need to replace it? So the answer to that is also fairly simple. It's because the answer the Mishnah gives has nothing to do with the question. The Mishnah gave 2 cases where Edom do not get the reciprocal punishment. That doesn't say how Edom becomes zomimim. So the question of the Mishnah and the answer of the Mishnah don't match. That's why the Gemara is saying that the Mishnah should have worded itself differently. Okay, now we're up to the third question, which is, what does this phrase, how do Edom not become zomimim, even mean? Now, it's going to have to mean something that will match with the answer. So one possibility is, maybe it means, what are cases, Ketzad, how, could mean what are cases, where the Edom, the witnesses, don't become zomimim, meaning don't get treated like zomimim. So we're changing the word Ketzad, how, to mean what are cases, and we're changing become, nasim, to mean treated like. So now the sentence would mean, in what cases are witnesses not treated like zomimim? Which would mean, in what cases do witnesses not get the reciprocal punishment? The fourth question is, why is this suggestion better than the Mishnah's suggestion? And that's simple, because now the Mishnah's question and the Mishnah's answer match. The question would have been, in what cases do witnesses not get treated like zomimim? And then we gave 2 examples where they don't get treated like zomimim, they get lashes. So what I just did is I just showed you how you can use what I call processing questions to make sense out of the Gemara. Now someone could just explain that to you, meaning the first step of the Gemara, what it means, but then you wouldn't be able to figure it out yourself. The way to figure it out is to ask these processing questions, and that will lead you to understand what the point of the Gemara is. What is the point of the Gemara actually? The Gemara, when it said, it should have said X. What does that mean, it should have said X? It didn't say X. So when it's saying it should have said X, what it's really saying is, why didn't it say X? So the Gemara is asking a challenge question. It's saying, why didn't the Mishnah say what are cases where Edom do not get treated like Zomim? That's the point. And the basis of the question is, I'll start with the since. Since the Mishnah's answer is giving cases where Edom do not get treated with a reciprocal punishment, it would have made sense for the question to be, what are cases where Edom do not get the reciprocal punishment? And therefore, why wasn't that what the Mishnah said? This gave you a very brief sample of what we do in the Gemara Skills class. If anyone would like to join, we'd love to have you.